£8.5 million is what Prince Andrew paid for his rent at Royal Lodge. Partly it was rent, partly it was refurbishment. The taxpayer has missed out an absolute fortune had he paid the commercial rent for it. But they always say in journalism, follow the money. And I've been convinced for a long time that the Prince Andrew story is not principally about what he did to Virginia Giuffre, which has to be said is pretty awful. But actually, it's taking money from dodgy sources. Why did he say that staying with Jeffrey Epstein was a convenient place to stay? It's because he didn't care what people were going to do, what people had done in the past, how good or bad people were, as long as the money was rolling in. So now let me tell you the story about the Islamic regime which wanted to ethnically cleanse Christians and was supported in that endeavour by Prince Andrew. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, please do hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they are released. Well, Prince Andrew was trade envoy for the United Kingdom, and apparently he was very effective in terms of getting people to meet him. He did it from about 2001 to 2011. And of course, the opportunity to meet the Queen's son was a pretty big driver to lots of people around the world, particularly foreign royal families who aren't that interested in meeting ministers and much more interested in meeting other royals. And there are a whole host of dictators around the world who are quasi-royal families. I think we all think of the Kim family, don't we? Where the presidency of North Korea is a hereditary position and all the senior positions in the government go to relatives of the president himself. That feels like a monastic dynasty. In fact, they call it the Hermit Kingdom. Similarly, there's the situation in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is increasingly becoming or heading towards being one of the richest countries in the world. There was often the joke in Borat about Kazakhstan, but Kazakhstan also is becoming phenomenally oil rich. Azerbaijan is the place they call the land of fire. You may know it for the way that it's rigged the Eurovision multiple times and ensured that it won. Well, in 2023, Azerbaijan invaded a territory principally filled with Armenian Christians, called Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh. Now, of course, Azerbaijan has had a history with Armenia for a significant amount of time. Azeris are ethnic Turks and therefore Muslim. And of course, we all know that there was a Turkish genocide against Armenia in the early part of the 20th century. And so that was something that there has been a long-going dispute over. In the time of the Soviet Union, Nagorno-Karabakh was given to Azerbaijan because both Azerbaijan and Armenia were part of the Soviet Union. They weren't merely allied like countries like Poland. And so this area, even though it was dominated by Armenians, was part of Azerbaijan. At the time of the falling apart of the Soviet Union, Armenia invaded and there was a breakaway republic similar to Transnistria, but in this case it was principally Armenian. Now, why is this relevant to Prince Andrew? Well, on 12 separate occasions, Prince Andrew met the president of Azerbaijan. It's not just in his role as trade ambassador. It was actually after he ceased to be trade ambassador as well. President Aliyev and Prince Andrew described each other as close personal friends. Now, at the same time as that, the government of Azerbaijan was spending $250,000 a year sponsoring people like Conservative Home and indeed hosting parties at Conservative Party conference. The reason was they said that they wanted to invade Nagorno-Karabakh and they wanted the British government to at least be supportive in the sense that they would do absolutely nothing at all. And their strategy was to ensure that British oil and gas companies mined the oil and gas in Azerbaijan, which is why it's called the Land of Fire, all of its oil and gas revenue. And all of that would be domiciled in Britain, and that would ensure that Britain would suddenly be on the side of this dictator when he invaded, to be fair, a fairly democratic country in the shape of Armenia. Now, what is going to happen to Prince Andrew in future? Well, okay, there were the allegations of sex, and I get that, but I've always felt, I said this at the beginning of the video, that this was much more to do with money. I think that when you look through the accounts of Prince Andrew, we're going to see time and time again dodgy dictators giving him money because he was sacked in 2011 as UK trade envoy because of how close he was to foreign dictators. Well, that's an odd turn of phrase, isn't it? How close he was to foreign dictators. I mean, it was his job to be close to them, wasn't it? It was his job to meet them. It was his job to develop business links in Baku, Azerbaijan and places like that. So why were they complaining that he was too close to them? It's because he wasn't just meeting them, he was lobbying on their behalf. When they were sitting down with him, they were giving him money, they were giving him benefits, and he was in exchange giving them support. Look at the Jeffrey Epstein thing. You know, this isn't about friendship. It's about the fact that he was plainly financially reliant on Jeffrey Epstein, or at least he liked his money. Epstein was almost like a non-sexual sugar daddy to Prince Andrew. And so we know that Prince Andrew was willing to defend a P in order in exchange for money. We know that because of the emails he sent to Epstein. We also know that because of the fact that he asked his personal protection officer to do some background on Virginia Roberts Giuffre, which I still can't pronounce. That is, if he's willing to do that, doesn't it suggest that he'd also be willing to support foreign countries? Now, you've got to remember something. When we were talking about Nagorno-Karabakh, a place no doubt you've never heard of, although I've been to, you were talking about an invasion and the ethnic cleansing of a Christian population by a Muslim country next door. We in Britain should have been solidly opposed to that, but we weren't. And it was people in politics, it was people in government, it was people at the top of oil and gas firms who were attempting to ensure that Azerbaijan were able to do it. Why? Because they wanted the agreement to mine and drill the oil. That is something that we've got to think very carefully about. How many members of the royal family are wandering around and attempting to lobby the British government? Officially, they're meant to be just advisors, but actually, in some respects, they are acting on their own financial interests. All of the financial declarations, by the way, that I would have to make if I worked at the House of Commons, or when I worked at the House of Commons, or you would have to make as a local councillor, all of those declarations are not applicable to members of the royal family. And so Prince Andrew was able to take all sorts of money. And so when they say he was getting too close to dictators, he was getting money from them. Of course he was getting money. How does he pony up 8.5 million when he has a 20,000 a year salary, or pension rather, from the Royal Navy? He can't. I worry about the way this country is going. You've already seen videos on this channel in which I talk about the Chinese spy that I believe is at the heart of the British government. The way that actually, in some respects, Britain is a slave culture, because us ordinary people are fundamentally just serving an elite who are serving themselves, who are more interested in Davos than they are in Britain, who will go over to Azerbaijan. Yes, they'll negotiate oil contracts, but they want a little tickle themselves in exchange for supporting an invasion and ethnic cleansing. And when you talk about the people at the top of our society, how morally bankrupt are they? Richard Hermer, definitely not a spy. He was one of the people who was taking money from the Chinese government in order to support the Chagos Island surrender. And then, of course, when he got into government, he signed it off personally and said that we should respect international law. You look at Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson hung around with Jeffrey Epstein. You're my best mate. Let's play and all that sort of thing. Let's have some more fun. He's talking to a man who's a convicted P. Prince Andrew, you know, he's taking money off Azerbaijan. I remember meeting the lobbyist for Azerbaijan in the Baku restaurant on the night of Eurovision. God, Andre, this sounds hypocritical. Okay, I'm going to stop this video just for 1 second and just say to you, when I worked at the House of Commons, Eurovision had gone to Baku in Azerbaijan, and they organised a party at the Baku restaurant in Mayfair or Knightsbridge or whatever. And I went along and met the lobbyist for Azerbaijan, and indeed I met the ambassador. And so, yes, I did take food, drink and a party from the government of Azerbaijan. But at the time, I didn't know that they were spending all this in order to soften up the British body politic ahead of an invasion of Armenia. And when I did find that out, I never associated with them again. But somebody like Prince Andrew, somebody like Peter Mandelson, somebody like Tony Blair, they would have gone back at the end of that and gone, marvellous, this is an opportunity. If you're willing to spend £100,000 in one night on a party in London to celebrate the Eurovision, then by God, you're going to be well up for paying me 20 grand a month to start lobbying. And why are these things important? Well, all that Prince Andrew has done is fairly similar to what Hunter Biden did in Ukraine. Hunter Biden took $50,000 a month from Ukrainian oil and gas companies in order to do over the Russians. And in the end, the Russians did invade. I'm not saying it's entirely the fault of Hunter Biden. I always said when I was in politics, and I'll say this now, it's important to always be clear who you act for. I can listen to anything that anybody wants to say, but fundamentally, I work for you. Prince Andrew should say, yes, he can meet people from Azerbaijan. There's nothing wrong with that. Having a relationship with the president of Azerbaijan, nothing wrong with that. But once you start being paid by Azerbaijan, you have crossed a line. We've got to get back to a situation where people are going to be patriotic. And I maintain, and we'll see, I maintain that at the end of this story, Prince Andrew is going to be found to be principally a crook who lobbied on behalf of foreign dictators rather than being an S-offender. Maybe both, but certainly I think his biggest contribution to British society has been his corruption and not his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. We will find out soon, but if he was one of the people that assisted in that invasion, then he has blood on his hands, and he also should go to the International Criminal Court. No. We should abolish the International Criminal Court. He should go to prison in Britain. Please do donate to the Patriot Fund. Until next time, goodbye.